We're Back podcast. Hey, we're at Megan's house.
Hey.
This
On
is
her
the
white
infamous
couch.
white couch where all the magic happens. No, I'm just
Zero
kidding.
magic.
Zero magic. Funny story. She doesn't let anybody sit on this couch, so I had to ask her a while ago if she's doing all right.
I stepped on it and I came off and I saw her brushing.
I saw her
was like-
eyes. I was like, "Are you okay? Are you doing all right?
I'm doing okay.
Are we feeling all right? Are we still
Doing
feeling
okay.
okay?
I'm doing okay.
You doing
I'm
good?
doing good.
You're
My
everything's
OCD's kicking
going
in a little
good?
bit. I'm okay.
It is. We got drinks. You're doing all right?
I'm doing okay.
Hey, we haven't spilled.
Yeah.
I know. That's
Yeah.
why I asked her. I was surprised to not have a coaster on this.
This is
So
class.
the Cassie Diddy video came out.
Ugh.
Did y'all see it?
Yes.
It
I did not want to see
Where
it.
where were we sitting? And it just kept playing over and over. And it finally hit me what I was watching, and I was like, oh, from 2016. That video
Yeah.
was from. Could you imagine if he was doing that out in a hallway? What he was doing behind closed doors.
So let's bring everybody up to speed in case you haven't seen the Cassie
Go
and
watch
Diddy.
or don't watch if you're
Yeah,
triggered.
if you're triggered, don't go watch it. But basically, it's a video of him in a towel coming down a hallway. She's walking to an elevator to obviously try to get away. She's got a hoodie on.
He must have been in the shower. She
Yeah, tried to
escape.
leave and escape. And he comes running down the hall in his towel after her, throws her down on the ground, starts
Kicks her.
kicking her. She's in the fetal position. And then did you guys see the pictures that came out, like of her at a awards deal the next day, and they're like pointing out all the bruises on her legs.
yeah.
And it's just so sad.
Yeah,
It's like it's
so
just
sad. I never liked him. He always gave me the creeps.
it's just the craziness and like everything that's coming out with that. It's just you know.
I'm glad it's all finally coming out because it was
Yeah.
like the dude thought he was invincible.
But you
Right.
know what the sad part was? Nobody believed her the first time, which
Right.
was sad. And it kind of makes me feel like, dang, like you guys had to see physical evidence of a woman telling the truth. But then again, there's other women that abuse that.
The
Yeah.
system, yeah. There are people
And-
that do it for money. Let's be real, there are. But there are like a lot of women that, and they wonder, people wonder why they don't speak up. They don't speak up because they're shamed. They're ashamed. That's just
They're scared
They're
for their
scared.
life.
Right. They don't know. Like, and if you look now, if you go back and look at like his past and like, everything that's coming out, like he had, Kim Porter that was mothered
Baby
however.
mama.
Yeah, baby mama of however many of his kids, she died. And like now they're saying that he's had something to do with it. Now who knows?
She was supposed to write a tell-all book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, what in the holy hell?
I feel like there's gonna be a lot more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
a
think
lot
a
more
lot
coming
are
out. I
gonna
was
come
watching
out.
an old Ellen DeGeneres interview where she was interviewing him, and they were speaking on the Chris Brown Rihanna violence, and she brought it up, and he got very like, well, nobody knows what happens behind closed doors, and well, he tried to, of course, give the politically correct answer, but then you can tell he was a little bit triggered. So I was like, there were lots of signs when you go back and look at it, but I just can't. I'm just very curious to see what all comes out because I want to know what he did to Justin Bieber. That's like what I'm
yeah.
I
worried
think
about.
this is a lot, and Usher, like it's all of them. And then Chris Brown has said like he like Chris Brown was wrong, but now do you realize that they're coming back and saying that the reason why Chris Brown acted a fool in the car that day was because Rihanna gave him herpes, and that's why now he shouldn't have hit her. But that's what they're saying or alleging, and they're saying that like she got it from having sex with Jay-Z at one of those parties of P. Diddy's. And so I don't know, who knows if any of this or whatever,
yeah,
but
like,
like,
who
Yeah.
but they like, who knows, but that's, word on the street, but it's
Yeah.
kind of just crazy. It just, I don't know. It's like you go back to the Me Too movement and then the Epstein movement and, it's just a lot of tragedy.
You know, the sad thing about it is, like, yes, those are celebrities that this is happening to, but those are really happening in people's, like, daily lives. Like, just normal people. And it's more common than we think. Growing up, I didn't think that that it could happen, to so many people. I don't know if I'm like, but
Yeah.
but to me, domestic violence isn't, I know it's not just physical.
No.
It's mental, it's
Yes.
Yeah.
verbal, it's,
Right.
and people are saying that, well, why won't they leave? Sometimes it's really hard for them to leave, especially if there's people that will literally chase you down and force to, you know,
It's
kill
like
you if
the
you leave.
statistics show it takes on average
scary.
7 to 9
Yeah.
times for a woman to
There's
leave.
so many things that you have to think about. Just it could be financial, it could be all
Kids.
kinds of things. It could be children. It could be, you know, a lot of times when they are abused, physically abused, mentally abused, they're not in the right state of mind. They've been brainwashed, basically. And so these people will go ahead and tell them, like, well, you won't get your children. You won't have anything. Nobody will believe you, blah, 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 blah. And they really start believing it. They're really mentally, like, broke down. So they do really believe those things. And so I think I would just say always, like, confide in somebody outside, you know, and if you don't have somebody you can confide in, just confide in, like, a hotline or somebody professionally that can give you good advice, a counselor, a doctor. Somebody will listen to you and give you good advice. But right now there's so many places that women can go to. Like, I've worked for, I've helped with a bunch of them, and there really are a bunch of them out there. So just because I grew up in that environment, that was always important to me. So, a lot of those places you can go donate to, and they help the women, Gateway has a really good one. There's so many. If you actually just got online and looked, there's lots of help out there if you were too embarrassed to tell somebody.
I was embarrassed. I stayed.
Yeah.
Like, in my marriage, I stayed because of my career. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't want to face, like, the possible, in my head, it was like the possible ridicule.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I thought, like, I loved him. You know what I mean? And I didn't realize until I got out that, like, that wasn't love. I was trauma bonded to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the verbal abuse, sometimes I feel like depending on the situation, can be worse than the physical
Yeah.
abuse. You know what I mean? And so it just, I was brainwashed.
Yeah.
For sure, without a shadow of a doubt. And I tried to leave a lot more than 7 or 9 times
Yeah.
over a span of 20 years, and I didn't have the guts or the strength to do it. Like ever, and that's, I think, would eat me up inside, because so many people thought I was just such a strong girl. And they
Yeah.
always say that you're the strongest woman I know. You've been through so much, and here I was hiding what was going on behind closed doors, and close people knew. You guys knew, like, maybe Maria not to the extent, right? But Carrie, you knew everything. I confided, but what's so scary is when you don't call the police, or you in those moments, because I got recorded a lot, and it would be like twisted and turned to fit a narrative, and like the abuse that was actually taking place would be cut out. And so when it came down to my kids, like, I run the risk of, like, almost losing my kids, like, and I didn't realize, like, how the court system is so corrupt until I went for, like, temporary orders of my divorce, and a person was able to get up on the stand, lie, cry, put on this big show, and the judge believed him.
Yeah.
It was the scariest thing. I just couldn't believe, like, what was going on in front of me. Here I knew, like, what had been happening for all these years, and I had no way to prove it.
Yeah.
And so all those times that I had been, he had told me to call the cops, don't you think I was, like, thinking in my head, sitting in that courtroom that day, like, I should have called the cops. Like, I just didn't want to do it. I thought it was, like, something wrong for my kids. So I just want to speak out to, like, any woman or man, like, if you're being abused, and, like, call the cops. You need some sort of record of it.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, like, then when shit hits the fan and you do decide to leave and there's no proof, like, everybody looks at you like you're crazy. Like, I just thought you had this great life, and they had no clue what was going on because you were hiding it.
And one thing that I know for sure is, and I've heard, I've heard a lot of women say, a lot of people say that have been in this, I guess, predicament or whatever. But once it happens, because in my household, it hadn't happened for, a long period of time. Like, it didn't happen they had a beautiful marriage for many years. But once it happened, and they stayed, it continued to happen. Now, the gaps were longer, there was remorse and all that, but then it would always happen again because she stayed. And so then it happened again, and the gaps got shorter because she was continuing to put up with this. And I think that goes for a lot of things in relationships. I think it can be infidelity. I think it can be abuse. I think it can be whatever. But once they get away with that and you cry wolf and you don't leave and they see that weakness, and I think this is just like human nature, that it will happen again because there was no boundary set. There was no consequence. There was nothing. So, of course, it's going to happen again. So, I will say if it happens and you don't do anything about it right away, the likelihood of that happening again is going to be a really high percentage. Now, I believe that people make mistakes.
Right.
I think that forgiveness, is important and people can make mistakes, but I also think there has to be some type of consequence or it's going to repeat itself. So that could be like what we were talking about in another episode where your non-negotiables are, where if you aren't seeking help and counseling and this and that, and what, anything like that, or maybe alcohol, like for my experience, it was alcohol driven. So, looking back, it should have been like no alcohol or something like that because it would just change the personality completely. So I don't know. I think people do make mistakes, but I also think that the other person has to take a stand at some point.
I know, like mine wore a mask, right? Like to the public eye and on social media, and he had this persona that was spotless. Everybody just thought it was, like he was the nicest person, and I could tell people like, well, you don't know the other side of them, and they just couldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Until they did. And very few, like, the mask would not come off very often, in public, but when it did, it was like, oh,
jarring.
Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I was just a witness to it. I've never been touched, hit, abused, anything like that, like in that type of relationship or situation. But it affected me like tremendously, like, as a child, like moving on, still to my adult life. Like I still have issues, with relationships and PTSD and things like that. So imagine the person that it actually happened to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I tell her all the time, I'm like, you need counseling more. I mean, I was just a witness. You actually have a whole different, trauma than I do. And like that makes me like really strong in relationships. Like if anybody was to ever, I think it's almost too much, like raise a voice or, touch or anything like that, I would just run for the hills. Just because of my experience.
So we see her running.
If you'll ever see me running, I'll be like, he yelled at me. That's going to be me. But I mean, I'm just like extreme in that way. But I mean, I had crazy things happen, you know what I mean, in my life. So.
But sometimes I feel like even women, they're not, when they're in that situation, they're not in the right mental state. Like even in your situation, like you probably were more afraid of what you could lose and what could happen, and you were not thinking straight. Like, oh, maybe this could happen.
Megan's already an overthinker.
Yeah.
Megan already
So I
has
can see
anxiety.
that.
Megan, she has the shitstorm just waiting already before you throw that on top of it. So her mind always goes to worst case scenario.
And I know you're a smart woman, but when you're in that mental state of, your marriage, your kids, your just everything, I could understand why you wouldn't be able, you wouldn't think how to,
Well, like when you're gaslit so much, and you have somebody telling you like day in, day out, like we're in the bad times, like all these things, like, you're mental, you're, like I had a post-nup on him. So I had gotten it signed when I had a business, but I had, it was my second house. It was mine, right? It was a house and 2 cars, but it wasn't my dream home. It was my starter home. And so, but it was mine. And I, came into that relationship with a house and 2 cars. And so I was smart enough back then. I also had my dad in my ear that was like, you've had issues with him. You've taken him back already several times. Now you've married him. Like, you need to protect yourself. Yeah. You don't know what the future holds.
So smart.
Right. And so I would tell any woman, I don't care if you think you're so in love, if you own a business, even if you don't even own a business and you don't have a lot, you don't know what your future is going to hold. Who knew that I was going to go down the road and make millions? Yeah. Who knew that? But I promise you, he tried to take it all.
That's a whole episode.
You know, like he did. And
Yeah.
so it just was like, that was always, I knew I had the post nut, but when you have somebody also telling you like, well, it's not going to stand in court, and you have someone feeding that into you, you know, and you have someone preying on your mental health, you know, like that stuff sticks. It sticks in
Yeah.
the back of your head. And so it's just a lot of manipulation, you know, and that honestly, those mind games and the manipulation and the lies, looking back, I can call it. I'll be like, and because I have to co-parent, right? And I'm like, lie, manipulation, you know, like gaslight.
I hope you don't go the other way, like where you're just so on guard that it's hard for you to like trust.
I mean,
you
it's
know?
hard not to bring your baggage into your current relationship. And
Yeah.
I have to say that a lot of times in my relationship, I'll be like, look, this has nothing to do with you. It's
Yeah,
don't
of
take it
course.
personal.
We all
It's
have it, right?
It's me, right? Like when you see me spiraling out of control, it may not even have anything to do with you. Like maybe I'm dealing with my own shit and I just need for you to like bring me down. And so that's part, you know, we've talked about communication a lot. Like that helps, you know.
This is where when G says, "Are you just wanting to vent right now, or do you want advice?" Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like shut up,
Can
Megan.
you please tell me? Do you just want to hear yourself talk, or you know what I mean? But that is a good question because sometimes we don't. Guys want to fix, right? Want to fix everything. So sometimes you just have to say, "I don't need you to fix it right now. I just want you to just let me."
But a
just
good
talk."
man will take you and your baggage
Yeah.
and
She don't
know
have a
how
problem
to
with
handle
that. She ain't
and
never
know-
gonna have a problem with
Yeah, I mean, nobody talks about the
Everybody
man.
got baggage.
Right, but
you
nobody
know?
talks about the man that comes when you're at your lowest point in your life, going through a divorce, and sees you at your worst and picks you up and helps you put the pieces back together. You know, that is somebody that, you know,
And then,
and then, you know, like it's
Preach.
just,
yeah,
nobody talks about that man, but they need to because that's the man that you want to be with.
yeah.
That one right there.
Yeah.
Because they've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. And so I'm like, well, it can't get any much worse than this.
When do we get to have a double date with that man?
Let's have a triple date. Triple date.
Yeah, he's so sweet to you.
He just works a lot. So it's like, you know, it's 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. So it's just like,
At least he's working.
that's right.
That's
like-
all I have to say.
You know, you were talking about your post-up and your prenup, and I mean, marriage is a partner. It's a business deal, dang near.
Right.
You know, so me and Trent don't have a prenup, but we got together, you know.
It's different. Like, okay, you work, right? But there are a lot of women and there are men that don't work. But here's the thing is like, if you work when you want to work and you have the means to help me and you choose not to help me, and then you think that you're going to take 20 years of my hard-earned work for my kids, because that's my legacy. My legacy is going to my kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, there were sometimes I worked 2 and 3 jobs in the last myself and working 20-hour days to make and build what I have. And so for somebody to come and say they want to take half and that they deserve it and that I'm not anything, I'm like, my voice got high.
I've never heard your voice do that.
And that, you know, yeah, and that I wouldn't be anything without them. Like, no, bruh. Like,
Yeah.
not today.
Yeah.
Not today.
Yeah.
So it's just like for me in my situation, and it can go both ways. I don't want to be like, oh, man hater, because it could be the same thing. Like a man could be successful and a woman could be after them for their money. It could go both ways.
But
But in
say
my,
that's more common.
That's more
right?
common.
right,
To
and
me,
in-
it's more
but in my
common.
situation, like it was like, get a fucking job.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like, you think you can go do it yourself? Go do it.
Yeah.
Go do it. Like, leave me alone over here. You know, you said you weren't here for money, but now you're showing you were here for money. And that's it. That's all he cared about. At the end of the day, that's all he cared about. And I, you know,
what's some advice that you have for somebody who's going through an abusive relationship?
I mean, you've said it. Just first of all, admitting to yourself, like, this is something that I will not tolerate. Find someone that you can confide in, whether, you know, it's someone that's neutral or not. I mean, someone that's not neutral, just somebody, a counselor, someone that could get you that
If you don't
help.
have the money, a church.
Yeah, a church. You know, just something. Heck, you
There's
can go to
hotlines,
you,
there's
or
free
you can.
hotlines.
There's what are those domestic violence shelters?
Nonprofits, shelters, yeah. There's so
You know,
many
there-
of them.
I watched a movie on Netflix. I think it was called The Maid or something like that.
Oh, yes, I love
Yes.
that book. I read that one.
So
too.
she was in a domestic
That one was
relationship
good.
and had kids, and like there's so many different options.
And
It's-
hers was more financial, so she wanted to, but again,
the
she
sad
didn't
part
have
is her fam-
transportation.
Yeah.
She had all these hits that happened to her.
and
where
then
she felt
his
stuck.
family knew that he had an issue, so
Yeah.
she turned to his family, and
Right.
so it's kind of like that movie Enough.
Yeah.
With Jay. So it's so many different scenarios, but the first thing is find help.
Yeah.
You're like, don't ever feel bad that you're seeking help.
It's the shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like, I faced that in my divorce. Like, you want to, because you feel like you have these relationships, like, with their family, that you want to feel like you can go to them and be like, hey, this, and this was going on. And it's not
I
right.
feel like it needs
And
to be
it
either
just,
Yeah.
right.
your-
No,
or
but
someone
like,
from your
it blew up
side.
in my face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It blew up in my face because the relationship that I thought I had, I didn't,
Yeah.
right? And it was like, they're always going to take I don't, for me, is different because the way I see things, I have a son, right? If my son ever puts his hands on a girl, like, he will have hell to pay because I'm going to tell him he's wrong and he better go apologize and he better fix it and never do it again. Because I will tell my son, I'm not going to enable my son. But there again, you're talking to a woman that enabled a man for 20 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like,
We're probably going to be more, wanting to believe our son, you know what I
Right.
mean? Whatever they tell us, you know what
Right.
I mean? Versus somebody who's not our family or not our,
but the hard thing
not our
is
child.
like when they don't believe you, like when you go to them and you tell the truth and then they decide to
Yeah.
believe not the truth, it's almost like being abused all over
Yeah.
again. So then it's just like, it's just a kick in the face. So then you just kind of come to a T in the road and it's like, all right, cool. Like,
Yeah.
I know where I stand. I know what this is. I'm going to take it for what it's worth and walk away.
I mean, that's like with Cassie. It's
Yeah.
funny because she posted that recently on social media. This may not be the exact words, but it was like, I low-key wish that you guys believed me the first time.
But,
like,
but
y'all mocked me
my part
first.
that I really, really loved about, her finally getting some validation was her husband now.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And the video, like him speaking out for her.
And the
and
letter
you
he
know what
wrote
I mean?
for the
That
book.
was like,
Yeah.
if you haven't like read it, it's a really good
And this is what I said, like, the man that will grab you, that will take you with your baggage.
because he speaks on that.
Yes.
Yeah, he was that guy. So that was cool. Yeah, that guy. We'll just call him that guy.
that guy.
What advice do you guys have? I mean,
You need documentation. If it's physical abuse, like take pictures, pictures and have it. You know what I mean? If it's a bad fight, call the cops just so it's documented that the police came out and that there was an altercation, because it's hard when you go to court and then like a lot of times these court systems, it's crazy in like our county that we live in, and I found this out in co-parenting class. Some of these counties, the judges are sitting on the same bench, like they're sitting there and doing family court, and then they have to, in the afternoon, they might have to see murderers. So you're like, okay, you're over here fighting about kids and this and that, and it is.
They get jaded.
Right, they get jaded, and this one's over here killing somebody, you know what I mean, potentially. And so
They get
how could you like,
desensitized.
right, like how could you like even go, back and
It probably
forth?
gets very hard
Right.
to decide who's lying and who's telling the truth, right?
Right. So
Because-
I would say document for sure. And for sure, without a shadow of doubt, I don't care if you're a man or a woman and you like are a hard worker or you come in, I would say when it's skewed and you come in with more assets than the other party, even if it's lower, freaking get a prenup or a postnup or both, because mine stood and mine stood.
So I know we're going to do a whole nother episode on this, but how long had it been when you decided to do a post-nup? Was it very soon? Was it?
I did it in 2011. So
And
it'd
you
been
got
13
married.
in 2010.
Okay.
But
So-
looking back, there was already issues of infidelity then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I kept catching him
You just
texting
knew in
women.
your mind it was
Right.
important.
Yes, and I had
And your dad was giving you great advice.
right. And I had I'll say people can make changes. Like I used to because early in my marriage it was a lot of physical abuse, and we were separated for a year and a half, and then when he came back, that for the most part.
Was
There might have been a few instances over the years that stopped, but then the verbal and the manipulation and the lies were just unreal. And then the
would
stuff
you
on social
do
media.
if this was happening to your daughter?
That is the main look.
What advice would you give
Yeah,
them?
well, that's the main reason, you guys. Right.
Because that's different advice, right?
Right. Like, it's not good, but that honestly is why I left. And it's not good, right? Because I have a son and a daughter, but like when you have a little girl, you do not want that little, one day I'm not going to be here. And I need for her to know what it's like. Like I used to say to my ex, like, would you want someone to treat your daughter like this? And he would just look at me and say, she'll be fine. I'll treat her good. And I'm like, no, they emulate and they mirror and they go by what they see.
The example that they see in their household is the example that they are going to seek out. Whether that is
Mom and dad relationship.
whether they know that they're doing that or they don't realize that they're doing it, they're going to emulate that. That's what they're going to seek out and think is normal. So if it's chaotic and stressful and drama and all that, that's where they feel like they thrive. Like they're going to go look for chaos and drama and all that stuff because that's how they were raised. And that's like, unfortunately, like what. So like whenever I was younger, like I felt like I thrived in those environments because that was all that I was ever around. And I lived in fight or flight, like forever, like probably just until like lately. Like, so I feel like I was always in survival mode, like forever. I'm always like looking and, you know, just, I don't know. And I have anxiety and things like that. But I think that's all stems from because that was all that I had seen, right?
Right.
So I don't know. I think it's important to catch that, and you caught it really early. And for me in counseling, that was really, you know, that was the one question that got me was, is this what you want for your daughter? You know, I mean, I didn't have domestic violence or anything, but still, like stonewalling, living in separate rooms,
The quiet
not
game.
having, you know, any type of leader or anything. I didn't want her to gravitate towards those things. I want her to seek out somebody who's loving and fun and you know what I mean, like an actual
And see, this is why it's so important to seek help because you wouldn't have noticed that. You would have been like,
I wouldn't
guess I'm
because it was a very quiet household.
But
so
when
it
it's-
wasn't chaos at all. It was very quiet, but in the same sense, it was very somber. So it's like, as sad as I was all the time, I didn't want that to
But
be
it
like
took
what
someone
she
to
decides.
tell you,
Yes, it
hey,
was like, do you want, A, your son to think that this is
how it's
appropriate, and then B, the daughter one got me. I mean, I know it was really important for the son too, so that did get me, but the daughter question got me because I was just like, wow, I don't want her to go seek out like the same exact thing because inevitably they will. They will.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, because I will say that my son is a success story. Like, I, for years, have told my son, like, look, I know, like, he saw the chaos, right? Like, he saw the brunt of it. And so it's like he knows where the bodies are buried. And
I think both of our sons, like, I don't know, Brylan's like thriving and he's very woke.
Because
I feel like both of them are.
like, but they also both know how to treat girls, right? Like, it's so cute to see, like, well, I mean, Brylan is older than Taryn, and so he's in the player step. I'm just saying, like,
He's not going to abuse them.
no,
Let's
but
say
he,
that.
he
But
takes them on dates,
Right.
right?
Brian,
Like,
play on, playa.
yeah,
Play on,
He
playa.
is 23.
yeah. But to watch Taryn, like, and the way that I've spoke life into him. I've told him, and to see him actually do that, like, when you go on a date, you pay. You open the car door. You open the door.
They
you
do
go
know
to
those things.
Right.
yes.
You go to their parents and you pick them up and you go and speak. You know, you don't just go and drop them off. Like, you do all the things. If she needs to get up and you're like at a game,
No
you take
smash
them
and
to
dash?
no. Girl. But like, take her to the restroom, like, do all those things. And to see him do that, like, I'm thankful, right? Because he does all the things that he didn't see.
I think that's things that we picked up, like, of just, like, saying those things over and over because we had to pick up certain slack. Like, I would always try to have those conversations with him. You know what I mean? Even though it wasn't something that he saw. He never saw a door open for me or anything like that. But I would tell him, like, no, you'd go. You know, I would try to use Maddie as a teaching moment for them. Like, she's going, go open the door for her. Like, she's a girl. Like, I would, you know, use her to try to have the teaching moments.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Maria, your 2 cents?
I gave my 2 cents.
Bring it on
Yeah,
home.
she did.
No,
She did.
I gave my 2 cents. You was in a zone.
Maybe so.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's just it. I mean,
Yeah.
seek help. I mean, if someone tells you, and if you're the other person that someone's, if someone's coming to you, just believe them.
Right.
Show them some empathy, listen.
Yeah.
Help them find
help
like
'em-
ways to get out of it,
And even when you feel like you can't listen one more time because they feel like you feel like you've heard them say that, and and you just get to a point where it's like she's never going to
No,
leave.
you just keep listening.
You just keep listening, because at some point that
It'll click.
woman is going to get tired, and they're going to be able to get the nerve and the balls to walk
And you
away.
also don't want something to happen to somebody and then
No.
you have to live with that too.
Right.
So
Right.
I think.
I guess I'm just thankful that I have a husband who's not. I mean, he's not perfect, but like you've said, I've been around situations, and I knew that maybe that's why I had commitment issues growing up, because there was things that I just wouldn't tolerate. And so it took me a while for me to actually give myself to a man, and little did I know that man was going to be my husband, but I knew what I wasn't going to,
And also as women, I think that we need to be looking out for our friends, like for signs
Yeah.
too, because a lot of times they're not going to confide in anybody. But if you see those things, we've had this happen before.
Yeah.
Like,
But it has to be
we've seen
good friends.
signs
It has to be
in-
good friends that you can trust.
We've
too,
seen signs in friends before
Yeah.
where we had to wait on them to speak on it, but we speculated,
Yeah.
and things like that. But you just always have to be there for them. You know what I mean? So,
No judgment, just
and not really have any judgment.
just
no.
listen.
No judgy zone.
Because at the end of the day, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know their current situation. Just being, being there. For
And if you're the one that's abusing somebody, fuck off.
Right? I'll put that's a 20. That's a 20 right there. Yeah,
no,
girl.
yeah, because that was a lot. That was hard. I was like, I low key went.
Carrie, go ahead and tell us their socials since you're on one.
Follow us on all of our socials, Got Her Back Podcast. You can follow Mrs. Maria Shelton, Meg's Unfiltered, and Inspired by Carrie. And thank you for listening.
Bye.